Well, hello, everybody. This is Zach Ragone with the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens. We're going to be doing our Summer Intern Spotlight podcast today. It's going to be a nice little series across multiple weeks as we have our new summer interns here with the organization. And we're going to kick it off by letting each of them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Cassidy. I go to the University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado. I'm entering my senior year and I am majoring in political science and minoring in sociology.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Frazier. I'm a rising third year at Florida State University, and I'm majoring in political science.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maryam. I am at the University of Central Florida, and I'm also a rising third year, and I'm majoring in political science and minoring in philosophy.
And we're always excited to have some of the interns here with the organization. They bring such great energy and getting the chance to just expose them to this type of work. And on that note, I think today we're going to kind of focus on what brought you to the organization and how you made the decision to kind of start an internship here. So we'll start over with Cassidy. Like, what led you to want to apply for this internship?
So, when I was looking at different internship opportunities, I was immediately drawn to the National Reentry Network for Returning Citizens because I believe our country is at a state of urgent need for meaningful prison reform. Too often, we see people that are impacted by the justice system who are reduced to their worst moments in life, and in reality, one mistake should not define the entire course of your life. I wanted to be a part of an organization that recognizes that returning citizens and those who are currently incarcerated are human beings that deserve dignity, compassion, and the opportunity to rebuild. And I think that the network's commitment to centering humanity over punishment aligns deeply with my own values and the kind of change I hope to see in the world.
Thank you. David, what about you? What brought you to this internship?
A big part of what brought me to this internship is back in Florida, I've interned in the Florida legislature, both in the House and in the Florida Senate. And I've seen how policy has been worked there to help communities across Florida, but sometimes politics get in the way and the people aren't the focus anymore. So I really wanted an internship that was people first, focused on helping people, and that was like the goal and not advancing some agenda of some sort. So being able to advocate for returning citizens specifically, I have numerous cousins in the legal system, in detention centers, and then my grandfather was a police officer in a jail in Central Florida. So having, hearing all of their experiences like combined really made me passionate about like criminal justice reform and making sure to put my best foot forward and like helping that space advance and not like a lot of times people let places stay stagnant and don't make a change and like they think like it's being worked on kind of thing or it's not being I'm sorry, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's not like
No problem.
things just aren't being changed. So
Yeah.
like being able to have like boots on the ground and like put people first, definitely.
Makes sense. All right, and Maryam, can you same kind of question? What brought you here?
Well, I knew I wanted to explore something within like the policy and advocacy realm because I am trying to focus more on deciding like what I want to do for the rest of my life. And when I saw that this internship was available, I found it especially interesting because I had some prior knowledge about the prison system in America and just, like the privatization of prisons and how that's been impacting individuals who are incarcerated and seeing, like Cassidy and David said, how, we have all of these organizations in place and all of these like laws and policymakers who seem like the change is happening and like there's reform going on. But I was interested to see in what was actually going on and how it's actually impacting people and hearing firsthand from people who have been impacted by the justice system and have spent time in these facilities and like hearing their perspectives. And it's just helped me navigate what I want to do and what I don't necessarily want to do or be a part of in the future. And that's mostly like why I picked this internship, because it aligned with my interests and also helped me understand like what I want to pursue in the future.
So I want to go back around one more time with you all, because you can everybody seemed to have some sort of personal connection to this in some fashion, and there's a lot of future focused discussion. So kind of want to ask, and you might not have thought about this yet, but is this field, is this kind of population as it relates to justice impacted individuals, something that you're seeing that you want to get into in the future professionally, or is it more just a interest that you wanted to investigate a little bit more, but you don't necessarily see yourself moving forward in? We'll start over with Maryam.
So prior to this experience, I never really envisioned myself going into nonprofit full time. However, being a part of this experience, I think it's really rewarding. And I think being able to meet individuals that you do have an impact on is, you know, everyone says it's like good for the soul work. Like that's what nonprofit is. It's good for the soul. But like it really is. And like not even because I feel like that sounds kind of selfish. Like, oh, I'm doing this because it makes me feel good. But no, I honestly like seeing how I impact other people and like knowing that I've spent my time on this earth, like doing something that can benefit people and not, you know, like hurt people or hurt the world is kind of like what I've learned about myself through this experience and working like in nonprofit field. However, I don't know if I do see myself doing this full time because a lot of it can be heavy sometimes and it's just a lot. But I definitely think a portion of my time and my career like will be dedicated to nonprofit work in the future. And I've especially really liked working with like returning citizens and a reentry organization. I think it's brought a lot of perspective to issues that I didn't have before. I've had conversations that have never even crossed my mind before. And I like being challenged and I like hearing about people's stories and hearing about people. And I think that's so lost in the world and it's so important. So I think in the future, while it may not be like my main pursuance, I think it will definitely take up a portion of my time.
What about you, David?
I think similarly, like I'm still trying to figure out what exactly I want to do. And it's kind of funny because it's always been like, I always had a clear mindset of what I want to do, but like recently I'm trying to figure out what makes the most sense because there's different avenues of interest that I have. But being a lawyer is one of them. Like I do want to go to law school, but I have a mentor and he always talks about doing more. And like, yeah, I can graduate. Yeah, I can go to law school, but what else? Like there's so much potential with like my future career and like, it doesn't have to just be being a lawyer. So, and like one of like the interests in law that I do have is like criminal defense and like wanting to be a public defender. So I think like seeing this side, like the non-governmental sector, and like seeing how the nonprofit space, it provides me with like a view of like reentry work on this side, but then also just how a nonprofit runs and how like we can be focused on serving people.
Makes sense. Cassidy?
So I had always thought up to this point that I wanted to be an attorney. I always wanted to be a lawyer. But the more that I have gained in education and the further like I've kind of advanced in my own career, it's just kind of made me kind of put that on hold and just kind of really want to evaluate what genuinely inspires me and drives me. I still do think I want to pursue law school, at least in some aspects. But I also think public policy is so interesting. And now that I've been able to work hands-on in a nonprofit organization, I think that the one thing I've always wanted to do with my life is help people. Like that's, no matter what the position is that I hold, I've always known that I want at the center of it to be that I'm helping people better their lives in some sort of way. And that comes in so many different types of work. And when I was first like working with returning citizens, something Mr. Stewart has always said to us interns is that you never know what one conversation will do. It can completely change your perspective or your life or your career path, just one conversation. And I feel like so many of the conversations that I've had while being here has changed my perspective on a lot of things and has given me room for a lot of self-reflection and just to kind of weigh the options, because I feel like we're all so young and we're at a point in our life where we're trying to figure out how we want to like determine our path forward for our futures. And I just think at the center of it, I do want to keep in mind just trying to help people and trying to make sure that no matter what facet I'm in, that I'm trying to make sure that people's rights are being respected and that people are living a good, genuine life.
No, that's fantastic. And it's one of those things, when you go through the system, one of the things that really jumps out and you realize is how important adaptability is and flexibility. Going through the system really forces you to, if you have that skill, to really utilize it, and if you don't have that skill, to build it. And one of the things with working with that population is you also have to have a little bit of that adaptability, that ability to kind of think on your feet, look at things, reevaluate. And I think it's a great opportunity that you guys are coming into this internship, working with this population, working in this field, and realizing what you kind of plan to do, what you were hoping to do, but also recognizing that, hey, there's nothing wrong with reevaluating, looking at things, possibly shifting up, because ultimately life is that journey and just kind of seeing where it goes. But speaking of people that have gone through the system and having to deal with things, let's talk about the criminal justice system, or the criminal legal system, as our CEO often calls it. As you were coming into this organization, as you were going through school and things like that, watching the news, as we always see, current events always kind of impact with this. What was your all's general view as it relates to that legal system, whether that is as it relates to prisons, as it relates to policing, reentry, things like that? What was your kind of thoughts coming into this?
Growing up, my grandfather, who was a police officer, he always talked about how, because he worked in the jail and had he had like a lot of access and like conversation to like talk to like the people inside the facility. And I think one thing he always like emphasized when I was younger was how a lot of them like deserve a second chance, or like they were in there for the wrong reason, or the wrong reason, or like they got caught up in something and like it wasn't like ever sometimes it truly was never their fault, like
Right.
how they ended up in there. And that always gave me like a mindset growing up that like maybe like they do deserve a second chance. But I definitely think like during COVID and during like the Black Lives Matter movement, it kind of gave me like a negative like view on policing and how are they ending up in there, like when he always talked about like they didn't deserve being in there, like how those systems were. And I think that definitely made me think about how the criminal legal system worked. But then the second half of your question, could you repeat that? I forgot. It was in terms of.
Oh, no, I mean, you answered the main part there. Was just in general your views as you were coming in about different parts of the legal system. But you actually hit on something that I think is really interesting, is that having a law enforcement member in your family, and so seeing it kind of from that angle, but then watching things like the aftermath of George Floyd and things like that. How did you handle that kind of mix of the views that were going on towards police at that time and your own personal experience with family?
I'd say like watching more than like I spoke. I think during that time people were very quick to speak, but definitely like understanding like everything that was going on and understanding that like there's bad apples in every bunch. And like, yeah, those were like not even just George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Like there's other instances of where there's been like police brutality towards like predominantly like people of color. And I think it was like impactful to like first have my own understanding of like what it's like to know a Black like police officer, but then also like see the other side of like how police officers can be like using their force like wrong. But I think like definitely just watching more than listening is like how I navigated that time. And like just trying to be a sponge and soak in all the information. And like but I think it's still important to recognize the importance of why we have police and how that helps like the reentry system as a whole.
So jumping in on the previous question about like what kind of perspective I've had on the criminal justice system. I've had so many different kind of perspectives provided to me because I've had family members in pretty much every facet of the justice system. So I've had family members in the military. I've had multiple family members be police officers. I've had multiple attorneys in my family, and I've also had people who have been incarcerated in my family. So I feel like I've gotten a big mix of different perspectives. So that kind of started to shape my beliefs, but I still didn't have a deep understanding of it, just because when you're young, you don't really get the plain truth from those who are older than you because they kind of want to protect your innocence almost. But I think, like David said, the turning point for me was the Black Lives Matter movement, because seeing such immense police brutality and the reactions to it across the nation was kind of shocking for me, because I feel like when someone's life is taken in such a way that George Floyd's was, it really kind of has the entire nation in a chokehold, because police officers at their core are meant to protect and serve the people of this country. And no matter what anyone is doing, they do not deserve to have their life ended by a police officer unless they are causing an immediate threat, which I do not believe that he was. And so even though that time period was so polarized and there was just so many different perspectives, I was trying to absorb as much information as I could, like David was saying, where I was trying to critically evaluate my sources first, because I knew that there's so many different perspectives out there that if I just keep listening to one, I'm not going to get the whole picture. I'm not going to fully understand what is happening in our system right now. And so as I've tried to educate myself, I've tried to understand the inner workings of the justice system on a deeper level and how that it systemically oppresses those who have always been systemically oppressed in this country, those who are people of color, who are in minoritized communities. And I just think that for our generation specifically, Black Lives Matter was so pivotal to the shaping of our beliefs towards the justice system.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, it was a massive thing for the country, but I can imagine, especially in that time period, how formative that would have to be on young people. So one of the things that, David, you said that always jumps out at me, because I came up a lot during the Black Lives Matter movement during it, is that phrase of a bad apple spoils the bad apple in the ranks of the police officers, and whether it was like that. And I think, does anybody at the table know that full quote or that full adage?
I don't think so.
So the full adage of that is that one bad apple spoils the bunch. And as a person who enjoys cooking, the whole notion of that is rotten fruit actually gives off chemicals that will cause the other fruit in the area to actually begin to rot as well. And so a lot of times the people that were trying to, say, defend how the police were doing were just saying, oh, well, those are just one bad apples. Even if that's the case, that phrase is supposed to mean, okay, if they're bad apples, you need to remove them from the rest, or it's going to spoil the whole thing. And so often we get caught up in the argument of, are the police bad or are there individual ones? When in reality, we should all be coming together at the very least and saying, those that do wrong, those that are acting wrong, we need to find ways and mechanisms to deal with that. And I think that gets lost sometimes in it. So when you mentioned that phrase, it just kind of jumped out. And so it was one of those things to where, from that point, is that what really pushed you towards looking at this type of work or this type of activity, or was it more just kind of presented more fuel to that fire that was already there for you all?
Well, I know that during the Black Lives Matter movement, I feel like a lot more legislation was brought to my knowledge that I just obviously didn't know existed. We were so young. How old were we during Black Lives Matter? 13. Yeah, we were really young, so obviously we would have no prior knowledge of legislation. But that, especially I grew up in a big city, so obviously things when those kinds of movements happen in big cities, it's a big deal. Like it's like there's a lot of people living there. There's a lot of people impacted. People feel very strongly. Like big cities bring like a vibe of like opportunity and perseverance, and so it was a really big deal where I lived. And so that kind of being like your first experience like with hearing about the justice system is definitely interesting, and I definitely think we were one of the first generations to kind of be like, oh yeah, here's police officers, here's what's happening, like you shouldn't like them, like, you know what I mean? So it was definitely interesting to kind of have that happen. But I would say that my first like real experience like that made me want to look into this kind of work was when Netflix released that documentary, The 13th. And it talks about like the 13th Amendment, obviously, and like the abolition of abolishing slavery, and how like the privatization of prisons like kind of loopholes that amendment. And that information alone was really kind of what like piqued my interest. I was like, wait, like what do you mean like this is going on like in real time, like and our government is like letting this happen and all this stuff, and then you find out that the government is the one paying them. Like it's just so it was like kind of like the tip of the iceberg. And so once I watched that documentary like with my family, and then you kind of like start hearing more stuff about it, and then I feel like I went back to like the Black Lives Matter movement, and then I like thought about a lot of things that I learned during then with like a new perspective, like almost because, you know, you hear it and you're like, okay, yeah, that's bad. Like police officers, like all this stuff, police brutality, like that's bad. But I feel like you don't really resonate with it or sit with it because you're young, you know? And then it's like when you have something, when you learn about something like even bigger than yourself that is interesting to you, and then you go back and you're like, oh, wait, you can kind of like connect them and understand. And I feel like what connected me to it was, because I live in Florida, was the Florida 3 strikes law, where like repeat offenses end up with individuals getting life without parole. And so kind of understanding how everything's tied together, and how, you know, if they get life without parole, but these privatized prisons can, you know, enforce labor without pay, like that's what really made me interested in this line of work.
Yeah, it kind of creates that perverse incentive structure inside there. So something I'm hearing from all of you in different ways is kind of the impact of media in some fashion, whether that was the news coverage, whether that was different sources coming out and giving background information, the rise of more documentaries and podcasts and things like that dealing with the legal system. What do you think the impact and rise of that, especially across podcast streaming, greater access to kind of individualized news, impacted you all, or how you saw kind of society be impacted as it relates to justice issues?
I think it allows so many different voices and perspectives that we wouldn't have been able to hear otherwise, yet that level of recognition that mainstream media does always get. And I think that's very important, because freedom of press is our most basic right. It's in our First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Freedom of press is so incredibly important, and and freedom of speech, being able to speak freely and spread knowledge about ongoing events and your perspective on them is so incredibly important, because it genuinely does affect the way policy changes. Because one person can light a flame. So if one person is advocating for a certain type of change, and then it gains more support and it gains more support, it just builds on itself until our policymakers start to listen to the people and make those changes. Yes, there are so many ongoing issues and legislation that needs to be passed and that needs to be refocused, especially within our criminal justice system. But I think that having so many different outlets to share your perspective is so important, because it does help light that spark.
Anybody else with any thoughts as it relates to the kind of media and some of the things that have been rising up in the past few years in terms of outreach for justice and how it can impact things?
I think in terms of media, like short form media and reels, that like prevalence and that like growth of that within the past 6 years, like since COVID, it definitely it gets information out fast and quick, and it tells a narrative that whatever that news source or like user like wants to share. And sometimes that's good because it's able to mobilize like people fast when you're trying to create change, but sometimes it can make things like very polarizing if they're just like, oh, this person's bad, and it's like, well, what happened? Why are you saying this person's bad? But I think it definitely it changed the way like advocacy works and how we're fighting for change. There isn't like you're able to do a lot of stuff just with the click of a button now. It doesn't have to be all of this organizing. Like people will see stuff, and all it's gonna take is 15 seconds of their time. So I think it's that's a big way like media like has like changed the scope of advocacy and like within criminal justice reform.
I feel like, well, I love reels. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm definitely a screenager. Like, doom scrolling is definitely my way of life. Like, I love doom scrolling. I do feel like media playing such a large role in news coverage has almost allowed people to lose the true meaning of holding an actual opinion.
Ooh.
I think media, like, often people fall victim to their algorithms. And I think, well, I think people fall victim to their algorithms. And I think, obviously, if you're the one promoting a certain view, it's going to keep popping up. And I think that's, like, you lose the whole purpose of holding an opinion if you only know one side of it. And I think people often don't go and try and explore the other perspective, the other point of view, when in reality, maybe it might not be like necessarily like what David was saying, like it's polarizing. So it may not seem like it is the view that should align with like the side that you're on, but like maybe you do align more with like that other opposite perspective on an issue, but you would never have that opportunity to understand that if you don't get that other side. And so while I do think that, like fast media coverage and like 15 seconds and pulling those people and getting the information out and then scrolling next thing is cool. And I think it does have like it can be super beneficial in like the mass spread of information, but I think it's limited people in their scope of understanding perspectives on both sides in politics. And
oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted.
Oh no, I thought you wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry, but something I just meant to say earlier is in the same vein of what you were saying is I think that fast media is beneficial, like you were saying, but if you're not doing the research, like Maryam was saying, can lead to a lot of deeply embedded anxieties and almost fear-mongering within the media, because if you're just kind of looking at the clickbait headlines and you're just kind of not really doing your own research and you're just accepting the headlines and you're scrolling on to the next and the next and the next and the next, and it feels like it's never ending, it causes so much anxiety. To the point where you kind of want to shut down and no longer engage with media as much. And I just feel like Maryam was saying, it is so important to make sure you're evaluating both sides of the argument, because if you're just looking at the same headlines over and over again from the same source, but you're not doing your research and making sure that you're evaluating every side of the situation and perspectives, that you're going to feel that level of like anxiety, and you're also not fully going to understand what is happening.
Yeah, it just completely undermines your argument.
Yeah. And from a guy that does policy now, it's one of those things to where even if you don't necessarily end up agreeing with the others, to be able to understand both sides of an issue allows you to actually be more persuasive and be able to try to recruit people to it. Because ultimately, from a policy perspective, the only way you can get policy pushed is to convince people to come to your side. And if you can't understand where they're standing, it makes it very difficult to find ways to be persuasive to move them over to your side. So I think that's wonderful points there. So the last little bit of a question on this roundtable type thing that I'd love to hear from you all. You talked about how you came to this organization and to this internship, but you also talked a little bit about your families, the cities you came from. People back home, what were their impressions to you getting this internship, working in this field with this population? What was their responses?
I feel like the responses I received was kind of a mixed bag of like support and a little bit of like fear for me, just simply because they didn't want me to get so invested into a system that is so heavy and that is just so emotionally hard to deal with, because it is so unbelievably difficult to make change in this country, especially with our prison system, because there's private owned prisons and it's just so deeply embedded in our system. And in so many facets, it is so oppressive. And just hearing the stories of the people who have been oppressed and disenfranchised by the system over and over again and reduced to the worst moments in their life. My mom, she worked in the criminal justice system. So she was the main one who's kind of like, this is going to be very good for you and it's going to open your eyes and give you a lot of new perspectives, but you need to also protect yourself at the same time because it is extremely heavy. But also at the same time, I did receive a lot of support where it was like, you are doing work that is incredibly important and impactful and it's needed in this country because we need systemic prison reform and restructuring. So it was definitely a mixed bag, but I think being here, it's incredibly impactful. And like Maryam was saying earlier, it's good for the soul.
I had like mixed reviews on from a different perspective. Back home, I'm from Miami, and I strongly believe in relationships with people of all political beliefs. So some of them were excited for me and thought that this would be a really interesting opportunity. And then some were really confused. Some really didn't really understand why I would go and do this and, help people that have in their ideas hurt society and things like that. But, like we were saying before, you have to hear that. You have to hear those perspectives to be able to change them. And so, having those friends, having those relationships in place that don't necessarily agree with what I'm doing or would do it themselves is important. And I can't wait to go home and tell them all about my experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say everybody back home was very, just excited for me to have the opportunity. I think being in Washington, D.C. already gives one learning experience, but then being able to, be in this area of work, it, just truly, especially since I'm, still unsure what I want to do, I think taking everything is a learning opportunity, and, there's always something to learn from every position that you're given. But I'd say it was a very positive, reaction all around.
Okay. Well, we're going to end on a light note, and David, you gave me the perfect idea for this to go off a little bit light, because of the fact, like you said, this is a very heavy field to be working in. So let's end it on something fun. David, since you've been to DC now and been living here during the internship, what's your favorite thing that you've seen or experienced in DC?
I'd say with the World Cup going on, it's been very exciting all around the city. But my favorite thing, I've done so far, we went to the Wharf and watched the first USA game. We won 4-1, and it was just the excitement all around. Just proud to be American. One of those moments, but it was just a great time, and then very scenic.
I think one of my favorite things was probably the different museums that DC has, because there's just so many different things that you can see and experience. And DC is just a beautiful, beautiful place. And just being able to be in our nation's capital coming up on our 250th birthday is just, it's really an interesting feeling, because I feel like everyone is excited to be here and is just trying to enjoy our nation's capital. And I think just one of the best things that I've done is go to the American History Museum and going to the Natural History Museum and just kind of seeing all kinds of different things and learning so much about not only just the city, but our world in general has just been so impactful and enjoyable.
Yeah, my answer is a combination of both of those. I really like soccer, so getting to go to all the different watch parties and seeing all the different events they have set up around the city for the World Cup has been super fun. Also feeling super patriotic now that America has actually been able to stay in the tournament.
Actually managed to win a little bit.
Yeah, let's go. And then, yeah, also just like getting to experience that sort of like unique educational side to DC that I feel like is so, like plays like such a big role in its like identity, like getting to go to the museums or even just like little things like reading informational stuff that's on like the side of the road that's like, oh yeah, did you know that this like whatever, or like how across the street from this building that chili dog place like was like an underground civil rights hub for like, and like what helped like station ideas for the like the March on Washington. Like I feel like there's just so much character to this place that you're constantly uncovering, like DuPont Circle and Pride, or you know, just like literally everything. Like I mean, like Cassidy said, it's the capital. Like just I feel like every movement that has been in America, whether it's small or big, whether you know it or you don't, it's had a presence here, and it's just really interesting to learn about and get to be in those places that those people were at some point.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you all for sitting down with us today. I know one thing I did want to say is, you know, Cassidy mentioned that one person can light a flame, and it's always nice to have that flame, but the more that you guys volunteer, the more that people volunteer, that flame gets bigger and bigger. So thank you for making it turn into a bonfire here. I hope everybody enjoys this series as we continue through it. We heard a couple different things today about, you know, prisons, policy, the media, stigma around this. And those are all topics that we're going to delve into a lot deeper in future podcasts. So I hope you will join us as we continue to spotlight these fantastic interns.